Hey guys, so we've got a new expansion previewed and two new heroes previewed within that preview, and I'm excited to talk about them. I wanted to talk about Magic first, who is the other one, but as you can see, Bishop here is the one I'm talking about today, and yeah, I just saw a lot of people, everyone seems to think Magic looks strong and fun, but people are less sure about Bishop, so I thought that was a more interesting and maybe useful character to analyze and go into first. That was, my main decision on that was made when I saw this comment from Gavin Dolph on my previous video, and I just thought, yeah, why not look into Bishop, see if we can figure him out? And I am really excited to do that. The more I've analyzed him, the more that I've kind of uncovered, so let's get into it. He has hand size 6, hand size 5, alter ego hero, whatever. Mutant trait, very, very good. Mutant supports events, that kind of thing. Same for the, the X-Men trait on his hero side. Really useful, a lot of good stuff with that. You guys know the drill by this point. The temporal trait is really interesting. It puts team building exercise on the table because he has some cards with that trait, but we'll go into that as we move on. No other special significance there that I know of yet. He has 4 recovery, which is pretty good. 12 hit points, pretty good. 2 fording, pretty good. So all these stats are looking quite good. 2 attack is fine. 1 defense is, it's not what you want. You'd rather have higher defense, but if you had to have a low stat, I'd probably choose defense, so it's fine. And what you might notice is that Captain Marvel also has 4 recovery, 12 hit points, 2 fort, 2 attack, 1 defense, and his ability on his hero side is called Energy Absorption. I think that is the name of her resource card. They basically have the same kind of power where they absorb energy. So this is really interesting how close they've kept the design, and it has to be on purpose. I think it's kind of a cool, kind of callback. They will play very differently. You might feel if you play Captain Marvel then Bishop, you will kind of see some parallels, but I think Bishop has a very distinct, much more unique identity and, game plan. So I think he will stand out just fine. So I'm not worried about that. So the energy absorption response I referenced says, after he takes any amount of damage from an attack, discard an equal number of cards from your deck. If you discard any, resource cards, you get to add them to your hand. So he wants a lot of resource cards. He wants to get attacked, and however much damage he takes, it kind of equals the amount of chance he has to get, a resource card kind of coming out of his deck. So really interesting design where they've driven him to be punched in the face, just like kind of, his ally version Injustice wants you to be attacked. He wants to be attacked, but he actually really wants to take the damage here, which is really interesting. And it's going to be risky because the more resource cards you put into a deck, the more your odds are of having a handful of resources and nothing to pay for, and that's pretty bad. So there is definitely a lot of risk involved with Bishop, but there are ways to mitigate it, which we're going to go into. And then we've got his alter ego ability, Temporally Displace. Response, after you change this form, add a temporal card in your discard pile to your hand. So he has a few temporal cards. I'm actually going to go through the kind of card count next, and then we'll go into kind of the temporal stuff, so you guys can get kind of an idea how that works. So you can count the cards. These are all the cards he has, and due to the numbers in the bottom corner of the cards, we can figure out how many he has of certain cards. What this means is stored energy is number 13, 14, and 15, and then we move on to his, precon, which is, got that number 11 in the corner. So hopefully that makes sense. If not, just, yeah, this is how I figured out the numbers, and this is what we know he has. Not sure about, what comes after number 7. I'm guessing he's got a couple of, the concussive blasts, which we'll talk about as well. Maybe a fording or defense kind of stuff going on. They're probably events because of the kind of way this is ordered, but yeah, let's get into it. So starting alter ego, let's talk about what cards he could possibly get from his discard pile to put in his hand when he changes to alter ego. So I think because his hero kind of ability makes him discard cards, part of his alter ego ability is to grab the cards you discarded back into your hand that you want to play. Like, oh no, I've discarded, my uniform. Now I can go alter ego and get my uniform, so I'm not fighting, without clothes, I guess. I don't know. I don't know what he's wearing about the uniform, but yeah, it's going to be really convenient. If you discard something you want, you can then go alter ego to get it back. So that kind of gives him synergy with other cards that might make him discard because he doesn't have some of the risks involved in losing his signature upgrades. I will say, I think the optimal thing to do with this is to get his resource card, because his resource card, Stored Energy, has a temporal trait. So let's say you draw stored energy or get it from your hero ability, which we'll talk about more soon. You've got it in your hand, you pay for a card with it, it's in your discard pile. You go alter ego, get it back, pay for something with it again. So you can kind of turn one resource card into multiple. Or if it's already in your discard pile, you can just start the turn, or whenever you need to go alter ego and get that double resource. So you can think of this response as generating one, tutoring one card you really want from your discard pile, or generating two resources from your discard pile if the right cards are in the discard pile. So I think this is really good. I think where Bishop has a lot of risk, his alter ego is kind of the anti, risk. It is kind of safer, more predictable. You can kind of play around stuff, and I think it looks good. I think it looks very consistent. The way he can, grab his double resource card from the discard pile is going to mean he generates quite a lot of money, which is rich heroes tend to be very, very good in this game. So then we need to talk about his hero side, and I'm calling him Mr. Resourceful, as you're probably gathering. That is kind of what he is all about. He's all about, resources and kind of discarding as a secondary or, means to get those resources. So Bishop, after he takes damage, he's going to discard, maybe get some resources. We have 3 copies of stored energy. You're probably going to want to run a lot more resources. We'll talk about that soon. But here's cards that interact with having those resources in your hand. One of which is Bishop's Uniform, which I referenced. What this is, it's a 2-cost upgrade. After you resolve his hero ability, you exhaust it, and you heal the damage for every resource card in his hand. So the timing of this is Bishop gets attacked, you resolve the attack, he takes damage, then you do the energy absorption response, maybe get some extra resource cards from discarding, then you do Bishop's Uniform, maybe get some extra healing from those resource cards and any resource cards in your hand before. Now this all sounds very good, but the odds of you getting a resource card are, kind of slim here. It depends how much damage you're taking and how many you put in your deck, but this is not always going to pay off. And, if you start the turn alter ego, you're not getting attacked, so you're not really getting anywhere from Bishop's Uniform unless maybe you play something like Taunt and make the enemy attack you on your turn, which we can get into that. We're going to mention that a little bit later on. But for the most part, Bishop's Uniform, if that's a card you've got on the table, you might want to think about maybe not going alter ego quite so much, but at the same time, it's inconsistent in its value, so I don't think you should let it restrain you. Then we've got Bishop's Rifle, and this is, very much like Cable's Rifle in some respects. Cable's Rifle counts side schemes in the victory display. This counts resources in your hand, but they both have, moving amounts of damage they will deal at any given time. And this one is just, no cost associated. You just exhaust it, choose an enemy, deal damage equal to the resource cards in your hand. So the more resource cards you have from your normal drawing cards and Bishop's hero ability, the more damage the rifle can do. But again, it's going to be kind of inconsistent. You're probably, with a normal Bishop deck, at least hitting 1 damage, and sometimes you might even hit 3. It's going to be, it's going to vary a lot. So a lot of unpredictability here on, the amount of resources you're getting, amount of healing you're getting, amount of damage you'll deal. So yeah, when it pays off, it's going to feel really good. When it doesn't, it's going to feel kind of, lackluster. So he's definitely got a lot of risk, a lot of reward, but a lot of risk. So keep that in mind if you're interested in him and, how that affects your opinion. A lot of people like risk, a lot of people don't like risk. So we then need to talk about his other cards, which all like resources. So both of his signature allies are really interesting. They're both parallels of each other, parodies of each other. So Malcolm is the damage guy, Randall is the forwarding guy. Their stats are just reversed in terms of forwarding and attack. They're the same amount of health, same cost, 3 and 3. And they have the temporal trait and X-Men trait, which is very, very strong. The action is really interesting here. You have to discard a resource card from your hand. So it can't be any old card, it has to, be a resource card. And that lets you ready the allies. And that's maybe not quite so good because resource cards normally generate multiple resources and you're just readying an ally. You can do that for 0 cost in leadership with like get ready, it's not anything too fascinating. However, if it has the right printed icon, you get to heal them for 1, and that changes everything because that lets you ready them and use them without worrying about them, basically getting defeated. It's basically kind of like game time, which we got in Cyclops pack, I believe, and that's very, very strong. So his resource card, Stored Energy, has an energy and aggression resource on it. I probably should have mentioned that before, and that is clearly what is intended to work with both of these characters. But there are other resources that work with them. You've got the basic strength and energy resource, that came in the core set and basically everywhere else, which you could use for this. You could also use for Randall the Power of Flight resource card, because if it's not for an aerial card, it still generates 1 energy. So there could be something interesting there. We're going to talk about that again. But for the most part, you're looking for stored energy to use on these guys. But even without that, the stats are still fine. If you're not using that action, they're still okay. They're nothing crazy good, but still fine. Supercharged is really interesting, and this is where we come back to Captain Marvel. So Captain Marvel has Energy Channel, which you can, build up through energy resources. We have Supercharged here. Action, discard a resource card from your hand, place one charge counter here. For each resource icon on that card, it's 0 cost. Superpower trait, which doesn't really matter here. So yeah, you play this for 0 cost, and you start to charge it up with basically any spare resources you have in your hand. So what both the Signature Allies and Supercharged have in common is that they are resource things. They're things you can keep on the board, and if you have extra resources, you can just, spend them up here, which is really good and alleviates a lot of the risk involved in bringing too many resource cards compared to a normal deck. And what this does, Supercharged that is, when you make a basic attack, you discard it, you get +2 attack to a maximum of 8. So that is really, really strong. So that is kind of like Captain Marvel's energy channel, but it can only go up to 4, charges instead of 5, but then it does 2 less damage, because of that. Each charge is basically 2 damage. And it's more restrictive because it has to be, on top of a basic attack, but it's less, it's got more creative options with, deck building and, things that interact with your basic attack, which is really cool. I like this card a lot. He has 2 copies of it. So between the Signature Allies and Supercharged, he has basically 4 resource sinks already built into his deck from the get-go. And last but not least, he has Concussive Blast, which also wants a resource card. The other cards, interestingly, Signature Allies and Supercharged, want you to discard the resource, not spend it. So this eliminates a lot of the extra effects on some of the aspect resource cards we have. But Concussive Blast lets you, pay for it, spend the resource fully, and get any effects that would give you. So that's pretty cool. Also has a superpower trait. And yeah, 6 damage to an enemy if you paid for this event with a resource card, Ready Bishop. And for free cost, I think this is pretty good, but you're going to only really want to play it with the resource card. This is still playable without the resource card, but it's not ideal. With the resource card, it's very good because you can actually turn this into, 6 damage and 2 thwarting, which suddenly looks very good for solo play. So I do like this card a lot. Just can you get the right resource card at the right time? I quite like this. I think all these cards are fun and have fun interactions. So I've already talked a little bit about the resource cards you can have. We've also got Power of the Mind, which we can look into a bit more later as well. But for the most part, I think he's going to want Stored Energy and the doubles, and the basic doubles. Maybe Power of Flight with the right build, Power of Mind with the right build as well again. And we then have the aspect kind of resource cards that I think stand out, and all of the kind of, max 1 per deck or max 2 per deck cards that we got with Mad Titan's Shadow and Mutant Genesis respectively. They look interesting with him. Healing an ally is something we've already seen his allies do to themselves, so Innovation looks good. Aggressive Energy, if you're attacking anyway, why not? Just putting these in your deck is going to make your hero ability draw you more resources, which is a good thing. And you do want to be careful. I do think there's going to be a limit to how many resources you take. And, same with Power of Justice and Power of Protection. He's going to want, I do think he's going to want cards that cost at least 2 resources to make sure his resources have places to go. So actually, is someone who will like expensive cards, maybe even numbered cards. So his doubles, if you have 2 doubles, you can pay for a 4-cost card without wasting anything. So the power of cards, I think, could be pretty interesting for him as well. But the question is, how many can you take? And that will dictate which ones you kind of, can afford to bring and which ones don't make the cut. And it's a tricky question. So for a bit of fun, I was on, chatting in D20's chat when he was streaming, and I made a deck with every single resource card possible. Someone in chat asked, how many could you do? So in Leadership, you can get to 40 cards just by adding resources now if you own all the cards. So here's an example with Black Panther. This could be Bishop. You can have 28 resource cards, which is going to make your hero ability, your rifle, your uniform all hit very consistently, but you're going to have way too many resources. But I thought this was fun to share, and yeah, we have a lot of resources, guys. And we're going to talk about a few more of these as we go on to different degrees. But for me, I'm thinking I'm probably looking at running him initially with 10 to 12 resources, which you might be thinking, whoa, that's way too many. And I agree, but with 4 resource sinks in a deck and the ability to add many more, which is what we're going to be talking about quite a bit, later on in the video, you're going to be able to alleviate a lot of that risk. As long as you get 1 or 2 resource kind of, sinks early, and maybe one of his signature upgrades that gives you extra value, even if you're not going to spend all these resources perfectly efficiently, getting, maybe, I don't know, 4 damage off of your rifle is actually going to kind of counteract that a little bit. So yeah, I don't think he's going to get perfect value from all the resources he draws, but just by drawing so many, he is going to get good value there. And he does have tools. And as uh, in our deck building collections, we should, depending on what products you own, you should have a lot of ways you can help with that as well and give those resources somewhere to go. But that is going to be a little bit risky. I think if you're aiming for a bit less of a kind of a power ceiling, maybe play it a bit safer and raise your power, the floor of your deck up. You could run him with, maybe 7 to 8. I do think if you're running him with, just, a couple of resources, then maybe Bishop shouldn't be the character you're already playing. You're kind of ignoring what he's all about and kind of just working around that, which will probably still be really good. He has good stats. He has, the mutant trait, X-Men trait. He's still going to be good, even if you don't play into this very much. But that's kind of my feelings right now on, what's going to suit him. Next up, we're going to talk about the aspects, starting with Justice. Now, Justice is the aspect I think has the least interesting stuff with him, and yet I see a lot of good decks for him, revolving around sometimes allies, but also Confuse. I think if you're going Justice, you're going to really be looking probably to his, alter ego side, because you can confuse the villain to go alter ego safely. So, and a lot of Justice has a lot of good things to play in alter ego. So you can go alter ego safely, use that response to get your resource card back, and spend it somewhere good. And then we have some other cards that are kind of interesting for him. So in multiplayer, Even the Odds is a very good card, especially in the new player side scheme environment we live in now. It wants an energy resource. His double has an energy and a physical. You can hit this really well. Very good card for 3 to 4 player, definitely. Feral, not such a great card, and I'm not convinced he really wants it, but I thought the interaction was interesting to talk about. So when she thwarts, you discard the top card of the deck. For each resource icon discarded, you deal a damage. So because he has all these resource cards, kind of interesting for her, but still I'm not too sold on it because I just think baseline Feral is, Feral isn't that strong. Global Logistics is a card I was really excited for initially with him, and I've called off on it a bit, but I thought the interaction was still interesting enough to warrant talking about. So Global Logistics lets you look at the top 4 cards of a deck and, put them back in a different order or, kind of move them about. So you can look at the top of your deck, stack up some, resource cards. Then when you're attacked, you can, maybe get, more resources than you would have otherwise by doing so. However, the timing of this is before you would draw your new hand of cards. You do this on your turn. So you're not really going to get the opportunity to set that up realistically in most situations unless something strange is going on. But nonetheless, it's a good card, and I thought that was interesting. I still wonder if there's some potential, especially stacking the cards on the bottom of your deck could be really fun. And then we have Mission Training. This is a card that I think will come to define a lot of Bishop's, Justice builds, aside from, generic kind of decks anyone could run in Justice, because he has 2 signature allies, which I barely really mentioned how significant that is, but only Domino has done that before. So he's got 2 really good X-Men targets pre-built into his deck from the get-go. So Mission Training always has a really good home. If he wants to go alter ego, you could bring in maybe Danger Room. So if you've got Danger Room, you could go alter ego, get a temporal card from your discard pile, maybe your ally, then play the ally. Danger Room will trigger, get Mission Training put onto that ally. Got some interesting stuff going on there. Just in general, Mission Training is really good on X-Men allies. You don't even have to be an X-Men to have a good Mission Training deck. If you are an X-Men, it's going to be very good. And then let's talk about Aggression. So his hero ability, and I kind of talked about it mostly in the context of the villain attacking you. When an enemy attacks you, you get to discard and maybe get resources. What this means is minions can trigger this as well. There is no limit. So he might like to keep out a bunch of minions on the table and take damage from them to get more resources, more discarding. And one of the advantages of using minions for this, you might even choose to say block the villain's attack and let minions attack you. Minions attack is predictable. There is a villainous, keyword, but it's pretty rare. Minions, you know what's going to hit you, so you can kind of plan around it and compensate and, do different things. And by having minions kept in front of you and attacking you, Bring It is going to be a phenomenal card to draw you lots of cards, which will give your resources, somewhere to go. So I think Bring It is absolutely going to be a fantastic card for Bishop. He's got that 12 hit points, just to, help him, use that ability. Angela and Looking for Trouble are going to help you find minions. Now, Bring It is really good. Angela and Looking for Trouble, Angela is kind of okay. Looking for Trouble, I don't really like as a card for the most part. Certain scenarios with weaker minions, it's fine, but otherwise you have to be careful. If we had some kind of card that would sit on the table, and then, you could pull allies to you, Bring It and Bishop's kind of strength in general, I think would be going up fairly well. So we have to keep an eye out. We've got Get Over here at the moment, but you need to be aerial to bring minions to you. We're talking in multiplayer here. But in general, I think Bring It is going to be a fantastic card for Bishop, and he's not going to care about leaving a minion out, even just for a couple of turns, or going into a strategy all about doing so. So some other cards we've got that are interesting is, we've got Hand Cannon. So he's got some ways to ready. This helps him, get more out of his basic attack and, make sure you don't waste any damage with the overkill. But why I really like this is because of the supercharged upgrade, which you can use to boost your basic attack. That, for some reason, supercharged does not have overkill on it. Lunging Strike has it, Made of Rage has it, Full Blast has it on Cyclops. A lot of Caleb's designs on older heroes in the previous X-Men wave, have overkill on these big attacks, and we do not have that here. So Hand Cannon is a good way not to waste any of that excess damage, so you can kind of take out a minion and deal massive damage to the villain, all in one, fell swoop. And I really like that. I think that's cool. I think Hand Cannon suits him, so I think that's interesting. Moment of Triumph combos with this. If you're doing massive overkill, you can get massive healing, which is going to let you stay in hero form, keep taking those attacks, trigger energy absorption, get some more resource cards during the villain phase. So I think that all works out really well. Then we've got attack training, kind of similar to mission training. The training cards go so well with Bishop. I think this is going to be really strong. And we've then got this new aggression card with magic called Full Body Charge. So you remember what I was saying about, he wants places to put his resources, maybe even cost. Well, here we have a massive attack. I think kind of suits his character. He looks pretty beefy, we'll put it that way. I can see him charging in. And yeah, I think this card is pretty good. I think if you have resources to spare, that full cost isn't going to put you off whatsoever. A lot of big damage here out of nowhere. And because you're taking damage from the villain's attack, you're quite often going to be under, half of your starting hit points, which means you're going to get the overkill on this one. So that would also work with a Moment of Triumph. So I think minion kind of related builds are going to be good for him in aggression, but also kind of overkill kind of builds are going to be good for him as well. Then we've got protection, which, as you can see here, I put a lot of healing on. If he wants to be attacked to trigger energy absorption, he's going to be taking damage. And I don't think his uniform really counteracts it enough. Sometimes it's not going to get you any healing back, So you're going to need to supplement, either keep going Alter Ego to heal, which I think is, Justice is going to do that really well, or you're going to have to look into healing, which we've looked at with Moment of Triumph, but protection has a lot of options for that, I never thought I'd be recommending Second Wind anywhere, and it's only a very soft recommendation, but nonetheless, if you do want to heal up to keep taking attacks, it is a way you could do that. What Doesn't Kill Me, I think, will be perfect for him. I love this card. It's a super card. You guys, if you've used it, you know what I'm talking about. He has that physical resource on stored energy, which means he's going to hit this very well. It's that nice 2-cost even number for the double resource. And because he's taking damage all the time, the cost of healing is always going to be able to be met. Similar for Momentum Shift, not quite as good as What Doesn't Kill Me in my opinion, but nonetheless, maybe it's interesting. Maybe you run both. I think that could be really fun. And then Med Team. This is more efficient to heal allies, but he's got those allies that you kind of want to heal already. So maybe if you're not getting the right resource cards to, heal them up, or you want to, prolong their life to keep readying them up, Med Team is going to help you, but it can also help you, as well get healed. So I think healing for Bishop is really fun. And then we have kind of ways to keep minions around or trigger your ability a bit more. Pinned Down is going to give the minions engaged with you, presumably, less attack, which means you'll draw less cards. You might not even draw any cards from their attack anymore. So this one's kind of just there that it's an interesting interaction, a bit like when I talked about Global Logistics. But I'm not convinced it's going to be going into a lot of his decks or anything. What I think is really good for him is Energy Barrier. Now, if you're just taking an attack, it could be any kind of value. If you want to play it safe or kind of slow down, how much you're losing health because maybe you can't, work out the healing or other defense, Energy Barrier is there for you. Energy Barrier lets you, just choose to reduce the damage by 1 and, reflect it, which kind of works for his energy absorption, kind of in the theme as well. So I think this is going to be really nice just to give you some kind of extra control about taking damage without having to, worry about playing a card or, exhausting for that massive 1 defense. Because he wants to kind of, draw those resources from being attacked, maybe Taunt will be interesting for him. Drawing 3 cards from it will give you a place to put those resources, but being attacked in the first place might draw you some resources. So I thought Taunt was really cool with him. And then we have Starhawk, who doesn't really fit quite into the theme I'm talking about here, but Starhawk is an aerial ally, and when he takes damage exactly equal to his remaining hit points, he comes back to your hand. What this means is if you attack then thwart, or vice versa, he can basically, you set up a cycle where he comes back to your hand every single turn, which means you have a home to spend 2 resources every single turn. He's a really good resource sink, really good card in general, block with him in an emergency, very, very good ally. So this is maybe where you would run Power of Flight. A lot of the aerial allies and things from basic and protection, Power of Flight goes in the deck and off you go. So I think that would be fun to try. I don't know quite how good it will be. It's definitely not at the top of my list of things to try, but I'm excited for that. And then we have leadership. This is by far, I think, the aspect that synergizes with him the most. Whether it's the best or not, I mean, it's leadership, so maybe it is. But it definitely has the most cards that I think, wow, this could be really cool with Bishop. He likes resources. Beast likes resources. That kind of deck writes itself. You could have a deck all about recurring Beast. Beast just getting you those resources into your hand, pump up the damage on your rifle. But he can also take, spend full resources on him. So he's quite a good resource sink in that regard as well, kind of, even though he'll get you some resources back. So I really like Beast for Bishop. I think that's really strong. Domino is very interesting. So her ability on this card, you can see here, after you use one of Domino's basic powers, swap a card in your hand with the top of your deck. Oh, I've got too many resources. Let's swap that with the top of my deck. Hopefully get something that isn't a resource card, and then I can spend my other ones on it. I think that's really convenient, a fun interaction. And then we've got Ant-Man. Ant-Man is a resource sink. You can spend up to 4 resources on him, but you can only spend 1 if you wanted to. So however many spare resources you have in your hand with Ant-Man, you can kind of choose how much you're going to put on him, and you're still going to get good value out of doing so. He's a very, very good ally. And really interestingly, I almost missed this. We have this Hawkeye ally that you can exhaust her and discard a card from your hand. Deal damage equal to the number of resource icons printed on that card is basically what it does. So if you have too many resource icons, she can shoot them at people. I mean, I actually think this is really fun and maybe worth running. Definitely worth experimenting with. Definitely a fun interaction, even if it's not maybe optimal, just to get some use out of this card, a bit of variety. So really interesting options in the allies here. So next I want to talk about the discard pile, which Bishop is going to generate very quickly. He's going to move through his deck from his energy absorption ability on the hero side. That's going to burn through his deck. He's going to get more encounter cards than average, which is a small downside. But on the plus side, anything that reaches into your discard pile is going to have more targets. So Make the Call stands out. It's good for everyone, but it's especially good for Bishop, especially because if you're counting on any specific ally or just have, valuable ones you would like to see, you have a good chance to accidentally discard them. They're not temporal. What do? Well, you get on the phone and you call them up with Make the Call. And that is going to be very strong for him. Like Panther, in a similar way, you can spend 4 resources on him, so he's a good resource sink. And then he can, attach a card, a leadership event from your discard pile to him to sink more resources into. So in some ways, he kind of is a resource sink. And you can actually make the call for Black Panther and then make the call to Black Panther to make the call for somebody else. So you can kind of get these chains of spending resources. As long as you have make the call in hand and Black Panther in your discard pile, you can spend a lot of stuff very, very easily. So I think that's really fun. And then we've got Pixie, one of the best X-Men allies in the game. Very strong, kind of a make the call built into the ally herself. So 2 cost, response, after you play her from your hand, add an X-Men ally from your discard pile. Bigger the discard pile, the more targets she has. And she's going to be at that nice even 2 cost resource sink, and then she's going to get you another ally to sink resources in. But if we're talking about X-Men and allies and things in leadership, let's move on. We've got to talk about Uncanny X-Men. Kind of, almost feel like I don't need to mention this. This card is already kind of busted in my opinion with the new allies we're getting. It's looking super good. So Uncanny X-Men is going to be a very strong Bishop deck if you build into that. Leadership skill I think is interesting because those signature allies ready up. You can burn counters from this faster than you could, on a lot of other characters if you just have the 1 or 2 allies out. So that takes away some of the, slightly, and I say slightly, slow tempo leadership skill can have at the wrong time. But leadership skill is a fantastic card. I don't see people talk about it a lot. Go use it. It's going to be really good on anyone, but Bishop, yeah, he's going to like this card. And then we've got MedLab. MedLab is in some ways a secret resource sink. It's a tool to recur allies, but it also gives you an ally just sitting there. You can then go alter ego and spend the money on them when you need to get value. Or it's really good with Pixie as well to keep cycling her. She can attack with double consequential to knock herself out and, keep going around quickly that way. So yeah, really, really cool options here. And then we have kind of, Voltron sort of upgrade based builds for him because Bishop wants to take damage. He doesn't really want to block with allies that often, I don't think. So you could do a build where you sort of take the damage, try and heal it up, mitigate it, whatever, and have an ally or 2 or 3 that stay out on the table and, put some upgrades on them. Because he's got a lot of resources, the expensive ones like, Iron Man and Yondu for those Voltron builds, not a problem. And we have new ally X23 who I need to talk about. So you can put any old upgrade on most of these Voltron allies and do pretty well with them. But X23 and, who is from Bishop's Precon, and also from the Precon is this advanced suit. 0 cost, nice cost. You can put this on X23 and bad things will happen to the minions. And these cards clearly seem intended to work in tandem. The response on advanced suit says when attached ally defeats a minion. The response on X23 says, ready her after she defeats an enemy. A minion is an enemy. So you can trigger both responses on X23 and the advanced suit at once, get all that benefit. You can keep readying her if there's enough targets, keep healing her so she doesn't die to, consequential damage with advanced suit. A couple of upgrades to increase her attack, and you can, translate a hand of 5 cards into, 5 damage, 5 damage, 5 damage, 5 damage, as long as there are minions on the table to hit. And of course, some minions do have more health than that, but that's probably where Bishop's Rifle comes in to soften them up. So yeah, phenomenal stuff here. I actually love the X23 ally. I think that's going to be a really strong one going forward for all sorts of characters. But that's a different video. So many possibilities in leadership, just so many, and we're not there yet. New card, Sidekick. Now, you might run a Sidekick with some of the Voltron stuff and build up your signature allies. And yeah, Sidekick and Side by Side readying, you're getting stat boosts, really powerful. And of course, there's a training upgrade, which I hadn't got around to mentioning yet. Going to be good with some other builds, Uncanny X-Force maybe, but you could definitely put Danger Room training on your signature allies, and it's going to be very strong. I want to kind of move on from leadership now, but I could talk about it even more. It's a lot of cool combinations here. I already feel like I've identified like maybe 8, 9, 10 decks here that are going to be very fun to play with Bishop that I really want to try, that I think will all be viable to some degree, and that is exciting. That is a really good place for a hero to be in terms of fun and variety. Basic cards, we also have a lot to talk about. I talked about him taking damage a lot. So anything that increases his health, increases his healing, is going to be really useful. Most of you guys should know most of these cards by now, so I'm not going to dwell on those. Symbiote Suit is really interesting. +1 hand size means another card drawn, means another way, place to maybe put a resource or more resources to power up your, your cards. +1 to your stats increases your recovery, help keep you alive a bit. +10 hit points speaks for itself. Do I think he's going to want Symbiote Suit? No. Do I think he's going to be better with it than the average hero? So if you want to play it for fun, Bishop will be a good place to do that? Yes. And, Bishop, we talked about having a bit of risk. Symbiote Suit is also risky. So if you love Symbiote Suit, I think Bishop will be a good home for it for you. Then we have kind of, resource things, but I'm going to move on from, Lockjaw Machine Man, who I will circle back to. People might see Digging Deep hiding behind White Fox. So I went on a journey with Digging Deep. Initially, when I saw he discards cards, he's looking for resources, Digging Deep seemed obvious to me. But then wait, when Digging Deep is discarded, it gets added to your hand anyway. All resources will do that for Bishop from his hero ability, so it doesn't matter. But actually, because he's discarding so much, I think builds which want to discard or interact with the discard pile are actually good for him. So you might want to run Digging Deep, because you might discard it from other means aside from your hero ability, kind of the combo off of all the other discarding stuff going on. So that's why that card is there, guys. But let's go back left to right. Lockjaw is a resource sink. If Lockjaw is in your discard pile, and remember, you're discarding a lot with Bishop, you can spend any X-Force resources on him up to 4. We've got that nice even cost. Machine Man, we've got that nice even cost, and when he attacks, you can spend up to 3 resources, to get bonus thwarting or attack. So that's really good as well. So we've got 2 really solid resource sinks here that you can run in any aspect. That is really strong. These will be in probably quite a few of Bishop's decks, I imagine. Unless you're doing trait stuff, or maybe he's got some other gimmick that we haven't seen yet in his other cards. But I'm pretty sure we'll see a lot of Lockjaw and Machine Man. White Fox, pretty much in every Bishop deck, and honestly, even if you're running like Uncanny X-Men, maybe you run White Fox just in case you have an open ally slot, because I think she's so good and he's discarding a lot. So yeah, White Fox will make it into most Bishop decks. Maybe not tribal decks, but maybe. And then team building exercise. Again, we talked a lot about X-Men. Team building exercise will work on X-Men allies. It also work on those temporal cards, the rifle, uniform, and the signature allies. So team building exercise is not mandatory by any means. It's not an auto include in my eyes, but definitely has potential and will be used in X-Men heavy decks for him probably. So a lot of options there. Then we have the X-Men stuff, which I've already touched on a little bit here. So with Power of Mind, you could run a Cerebro deck. There are now a lot of psionic allies to enable Cerebro. There are now a lot of X-Men allies to be, drawn from Cerebro. A lot of them are psionic, so the Power of the Mind might find a home there. I do think that's maybe not optimal, but maybe it's fun. Worth trying, I think, honestly. Utopia, I mean, if you're getting allies out and you're not blocking with them because you want to take the hit to draw resources, Utopia is going to increase your ally limits, so maybe you can set up some larger boards. That might even lead into, lead from the front in leadership, that kind of thing, for burst damage. You might even want to use this to ready up your Voltron allies. X23 again, you never know. Maybe she needs to hit an ally twice, and then you can continue the frenzy of attacks. But you probably just ready yourself with this, and it's very, very good. Game time, we've talked about all the training upgrades. If you've got a training upgrade out on any kind of ally, game time basically becomes the best card in the game. Maybe that's an exaggeration, but it's not far from the truth. And we've got Mutant Education, which came with Gambit, who also has a lot of resource cards, and Mutant Education is going to be very good here as well. You can shuffle stored energy from your discard pile back into your deck, so now your hero ability has a bigger chance of hitting it. Alternatively, any essential things you've accidentally discarded, this is another way to put even more of them back in your deck and kind of, give yourself another chance to get them rather than discard them aside from your hero ability. I just think this has a lot of potential, so I really like this card here. And again, if you combo it with X-Mansion, it's going to help heal your allies, it's going to work into that Voltron kind of angle and all that good stuff, or even heal yourself. So really, really like the X-Men stuff with Bishop. I think he's kind of designed to work with all of them pretty well. Now, we do have the X-Gene and Death Focus, which so far we've only seen one event. We don't know how many copies of it there are, and we don't know what other events he'll have to work with Death Focus and X-Gene. So right now he's got one target. It could be up to, 6 targets or something. But even then, these are not auto-includes to me, but they might be good. They might be worth using. So I'm not sure on these, but I wanted to shout them out because I think people, see, oh, he's got a superpower event, throw in Death Focus. Not always the case. We will have to wait and see. So that brings us kind of to the end of my overall kind of look at him. We've got a lot of different cool archetypes, a lot of cool deck building options, a lot of resource sinks that will make him a lot more consistent, especially in protection and leadership. But I think just this kind of rely on going that alter ego. Aggression has some kind of cool stuff going on as well. So I'm really intrigued here. We can see his damage, 4 stars. He's got that concussive blast event, probably 2 to 3 of them. He's got 2 copies of supercharge. He's got the rifle. He has 2 attack. I think his damage is going to be a little bit above average. Nothing like super exceptional, but still very, very strong. Forwarding, harder to guess. 2 forwarding baseline is good, to have though. Probably will have a forwarding event, but his attack event readies him, which means you can use that 2 forwarding again. So, and he's got those allies. One of them has 2 forwarding, and you can heal it and ready it to some degree. So I definitely think his forwarding is going to be pretty good. I don't know if it's going to end up at 4 stars or 3 stars. I can't imagine it would be 5 unless his forwarding event is like, out of this world. But nonetheless, I don't think you'll struggle with threat. So that is always nice for solo play. Survivability is really hard to gauge here. So 12 hit points for recovery is very good. 1 defense is very bad. So I'm not really sure how this is going to go. He's got that healing though coming from the uniform. I could even move this down to 3. But if he comes with a good defense card or something, I think, which I assume he's going to have another way to mitigate damage, just because his hero card is really driving that to happen a lot. So we'll see what he comes with. I'm expecting something here to boost this up to 4. But if there is nothing else, I will probably say it should actually just be 3. But we'll see how that all plays out. Economy, I've talked about those 3 copies of the double resource stored energy, which he can then grab when he goes alter ego. And he's got, all the X-Men support stuff going on, which we're probably going to run without, I don't normally try to include aspect stuff here that he could run, because otherwise everything would be like maxed out everywhere. But every deck kind of, unless it's rush, kind of wants some kind of economy without going out of its way to put that in. He works so well with a lot of it, and he is just inherently rich. Control, we haven't seen any control unless I'm forgetting something, which is entirely possible, but I don't think so. yeah, he's got no stuns or anything like that. Nothing that says, hey, villain, you can't do this thing you want to do. But that's fine. He's got value elsewhere. Captain Marvel definitely did not need much control, although Spider-Woman had it, her signature ally. So we'll see how that goes. Speed of setup is a weird one to predict here, so I put it kind of in the middle. I definitely think he wants his uniform. I think he wants his rifle. If you're playing into his game plan, he's going to want those things. And yeah, so you've got a couple of cards you really want to get into play. How do you find them? Well, since he discards so much and then can go Ultra Ego to grab one, and they do have the temporal trait, he can then get one and play it that way. So he's going to, through discarding, maybe find them quicker than usual. So I could have put this up higher, but I don't really know what his overall power level is going to look like with those. I think they're kind of inconsistent, so he might want some other upgrades and things generally to ramp up in power. So for now, I'm sitting in the middle on speed of setup. Reliability, down to 2. This is where I think, Bishop falls short. This is his downside. This is, and having a strength and weakness, is good on a character. This is his weakness. Is he going to be reliable? You could have too many resource cards in your hand. Maybe you don't find any resource cards with your hero ability. Maybe your upgrades are then, not doing anything. Sometimes they're gonna feel amazing. Sometimes they're gonna suck, to put it bluntly. And I think you can mitigate that a lot, as I've talked about. A lot of the deck building options here are specifically to try and mitigate that. But even so, I think it's going to be a factor. Card value, I put at 3, kind of in the middle. This is kind of a weird one for me. Some of his cards are just a little bit below what I'd expect. Yeah, his attack Concussive Blast is good, but you need a resource card. His attack card, not attack card, but the supercharged damage card is good, but it's not quite as good as Captain Marvel's. I think overall it's not as flexible, and it's only goes up to 4 charges instead of 5. All these little things, just nothing is jumping out at me as absolutely incredible, except the fact he has 3 double resource cards in his deck. But I do like him. I like his abilities and things. I think he's absolutely solid. I don't think they're going to feel weak, but you're not going to be like blown away by the power of that card you just played. That's what I'm expecting. So that's kind of what I'm looking at in terms of power. Those are the kind of stats. That's my guess. In terms of your experience playing him, ease of play, I've gone for 3 stars in the middle as well. I don't think that's how it will end, but I put an asterisk here. What I think for Bishop is he is not that complicated to play, but he's quite complicated to deck build for. To get the right amount of resources, and ways to spend them, and a nice balance to get a smooth flow of play, fairly consistently. There's always some, randomness in card games, drawing the right cards. That is where I think it's going to be tricky. So I think with a bad deck, he's going to feel awful and clunky, and you might feel like he's hard to play. What do I do? With a good deck, I think he will feel at least, pretty okay, not too bad. In terms of variety, I don't know if you just saw all these stuff I went through in the aspects. I think he has so many hooks in the different aspects, so many different ways you can deck build him. I think he looks really, really good in that regard. Almost put him at 5. I'm not quite sure, because he does seem to have like quite a set game plan here. But I think the variety is looking good. I think you can play Bishop, 3 or 4 times in the same aspect and get a different experience every single time. So then we've got fun factor, which I have left blank. On one side of the coin, he's not out yet. We don't know all his cards. I don't really want to say he's not fun or he's really fun and, it'd be completely the opposite. But on the other hand, because of the unreliability, I need to really, I feel like, play him to see quite how. I think the reliability is going to, be one of the biggest influences on his fun. If he feels really unreliable, you're probably not going to have a good time with him. If he feels at least, I don't know, 80% reliable or, more, I think he's going to feel really good to play, because discarding those cards from his energy absorption ability is kind of going to be the gambling thrill. If you've got an addictive personality, you might always want to be taking that extra hit, get those extra cards, hopefully draw a resource kind of thing going on. I think that's kind of a fun thrill. And he's got some cool kind of, interactions with his different cards and resources. So I do think he'll be really fun, but I'm not quite 100% on where that's going to land. So what everyone's probably waiting for, how do I rank him in terms of power? Just as a guess, as a prediction for fun, well, I've landed on the B tier. So a lot of the characters that I say, have really, high potential, but kind of low reliability, they've got some kind of fatal flaw or inconsistent, something weird in their deck, in their style of play. Those often end up in the C tier for me, but I think the mutant trait and having lots of money is so strong, he's probably going to be at least B tier, So we'll see how that lines up. probably toward the middle of it or maybe the lower side. I don't think near the top, but you never know. And we're getting stronger and stronger cards all the time. Maybe there'll be something else that synergizes with him. But yeah, that brings it to the end of our video. Thank you for watching. Subscribe if you want to see more. Next video will be about magic, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.